I have something else for tonight, but just till everybody comes. Mother asked me in 1968 when we met her, she said, you wouldn't want to come to Aurobindo in a few years? I feel you can do something there. And I said to her, Mother, whatever is your will. So then I went back to the US. And within a month, Udar, one of her secretaries, writes to me and he says, Mother wants you to prepare to come and build the gardens of the Matrimandir. Oh, what a shock. Only now, so many years later, I realize how she was preparing me since childhood. I did landscape gardening when I was in my teens with my father in temperate climate species. And then she sent me to California to learn subtropical species, preparing me for Aurobindo and the tropical species. But to continue this story, and there are so many things I could share with you, I wrote back to Mother and I said, do you want me to work physically with a landscape company or go to college? Mother's answer was both. So I had to work during the day with a landscape company and go to college in the evening, where I studied plant combination theory and other things. Met a great teacher also. So she said in a few years, but 9 months later, she sends me a telegram. A bientôt. See you soon. We dropped everything. Everything. Sold everything we had, got rid of everything, and came to Mother. And we met Mother. I should go back a little bit. She first asked me, when I wrote to her, I was in a very serious car accident and my wife went through the windshield and her face was just filled with scars. And we received $3,000 for medical expenses. It wasn't McDonald's where you could get $1 million for spilling a cup of coffee on your hand. Not in those days. 3,000 was a lot of money. So I wrote to Mother. I said, Mother, I want to send this money to you because you saved our lives. She had told me that there would be no scars on my wife's face. The moment I heard that, I had the inspiration or intuition, whatever you wish to call it, to go out and buy vitamin C capsules, break them open and put them on all the scars. She had no scars at all. So now we come to her. Of course, I had come to her many, many years before. I first met her in 1961. And I can tell you that it was the meeting that changed my life. She greeted me alone. There was no one else in the room. How many of you been to Sri Aurobindo's room? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Quite a few. Oh, most of you. Right. Well, when you go out of his room, you go into the middle room where the cats are there. And then you go into the last room where they used to give their darshan. First they gave it on the chair, on the big bench, but then they gave it inside that room. And as you go out, there's a chair there. That is Mother's chair. And that's where I met her. No one else in the room in those days. And she greeted me with resounding joy. Bonjour! Powerful voice. And I knelt down and I put my head on her feet. And she said to me, would you like to talk or would you like to meditate? Now I'm just turned 23 and I don't know anything about meditation. So I said, meditate, Mother. And then she changed my life completely. The things she did, I can hardly speak of. She gave me initiation. She started a fire in my chest. And the fire rose and rose and rose until it was huge flames in the sky. But there was no heat, no burning at all. And it went on for so long. And in the end, all I could do was fall at her feet and weep. So when we came this time, after 9 months only, she spoke to me and she said, of the gardens, it must be a thing of great beauty, of such a beauty that when men enter, they will say, ah, this is it. And they will experience physically and concretely the significance of each garden. In the garden of youth, they will know youth. In the garden of bliss, they will know bliss. She called it félicité. And then she said to me, and raised her hand and said, one must know how to move from consciousness to consciousness. For a young kid, that was an experience. And so we went to find a place. It was very difficult in those days. It was all desert. There were a couple of palm trees. You could see the sea if you turned this way, and if you turned to the right, you could see the Jinji Hills. There was nothing. It was totally nothing at all. In fact, I became friendly with the chief conservators of forests, and they wrote a letter and said that in 50 years, that land would be uninhabitable because the villagers couldn't get 2 bags of peanuts from an acre. Why? Because during the monsoon, all the topsoil went into the canyons and into the sea. Only when Aurobindo came, we bunded the land. We made bunds at the highest level so that the rain could soak in, then another level so it could soak in. And for a while, the villagers broke the bunds. They said, this is our land. You can't do this. We had very good people in those days, and they explained to them how beneficial this would be. And then there were other people, wonderful, wonderful souls, who started damming up the canyons. And today, no rainfall goes into the sea. In those days, the sea was brown. It was reddish brown. All the topsoil, all the valuable topsoil. I would grow 10,000 seedlings every year and give them to the Greenbelt. And they started the Greenbelt, which Mother said had to be done because it would change the climate and it would encourage the rains to come. You come from Aurobindo and you go into Pandi and it's 5 to 7 degrees hotter in Pandi. Not only that, but it's more humid. The beautiful breezes we get in Aurobindo, not there at all. Yet Pandi is the home of the ashram. So I began that work, and I had friends such as Selvam. Some of you may know Selvam, who has been my right hand for more than 40 years. And we would plant in what was called at that time the outer gardens, because the inner gardens, Roger Angers wanted little jewel gardens, just 1 meter across or something. And we had all this land. So, not causing any problems, I planted dozens of trees in the outer gardens. Most of them have died now for lack of care. But it was an incredible time, because in those days the young boys from the ashram would come out at midnight and they would dig holes for me. And we would mix compost and soil, and then I would plant the trees the next morning. And there was such a harmony between the ashram and Aurobindo. That ended, of course, after a while. Some of it was due to the drug culture in Aurobindo. Other things were political. But I won't get into that, because I want to talk to you tonight about a very small book, The Yoga and Its Objects. It costs 28 rupees and is the condensed key to Sri Aurobindo's yoga. I will read from the beginning first. The yoga we practice is not for ourselves alone, but for the divine. Its aim is to work out the will of the divine in the world, to effect a spiritual transformation, and to bring down a divine nature and a divine life into the mental, vital, and physical nature and life of humanity. Its object is not personal mukti, although mukti is a necessary condition of the yoga, but the liberation and transformation of the human being. It is not personal ananda, but the bringing down of the divine ananda, Christ's kingdom of heaven, our Satya Yuga, upon the earth. Of moksha, we have no personal need. For the soul is nityamukta, and bondage is an illusion. We play at being bound. We are not really bound. We can be free when God wills, for He, our Supreme Self. Again, we can be free when God wills, for He, our Supreme Self, is the master of the game. And without His grace and permission, no soul can leave the game. It is often God's will in us to take through the mind the bhoga of ignorance, of the dualities, of joy and grief, of pleasure and pain, of virtue and sin, of enjoyment and renunciation. For long ages, in many countries, he never even thinks of the yoga, but plays out this play century after century without wearying of it. There is nothing evil in this, nothing which we need condemn, or from which we need shrink. It is God's play. The wise man is he who recognizes this truth, and knowing his freedom, yet plays out God's play, waiting for his command to change the methods of the game. The command is now. God always keeps for himself a chosen country in which the higher knowledge is, through all chances and dangers, by the few or the many, continually preserved. And for the present, in this Chatuyuga at least, that country is India. Whenever he chooses to take the full pleasure of ignorance, of the dualities of strife and wrath, and tears and weakness and selfishness, the tamasic and rajasic pleasures of the play of Kali, in short, he dims the knowledge in India and puts her down into weakness and degradation, so that she may retire into herself and not interfere with this movement of his Leela. When he wants to rise up from the mud and Narayana in man to become once again mighty and wise and blissful, then he once more pours out the knowledge on India and raises her up so that she may give the knowledge with its necessary consequences of might, wisdom, and bliss to the whole world. When there is the contracted movement of knowledge, the yogins in India withdraw from the world and practice yoga for their own liberation and delight, or for the liberation of a few disciples. But when the movement of knowledge again expands, and the soul of India expands with it, they come forth once more and work in the world and for the world. It is only India that can discover the harmony, because it is only by change, not a mere readjustment of man's present nature, that it can be developed. And such a change is not possible except by yoga. The nature of man and of things is at present a discord, a harmony that has got out of tune. The whole heart and action, the mind of man must be changed, but from within, not from without, not by political and social institutions, not even by creeds and philosophies, but by realization of God in ourselves and the world, and a remolding of life by that realization. This can only be effected by Purna Yoga, a yoga not developed to a particular purpose, even though that purpose be mukti or ananda, but to the fulfillment of the divine humanity in ourselves and others. For this purpose, the practices of Hatha and Raja Yoga are not sufficient, and even the Trimarga will not serve. We must go higher and resort to the Ajnana Yoga. The principle is in knowledge, the realization of all things that we see or do not see, but are aware of: men, things, ourselves, events, gods, titans, angels, as one divine Brahman, and in action and attitude, an absolute surrender, self-surrender to the Purusha, the transcendent, infinite, and universal personality who is at once personal and impersonal, finite and infinite, self-limiting and illimitable, one and many, and informs with his being not only the gods above, but man and the worm and the clod below. The surrender must be complete. Nothing must be reserved. No desire, no demand, no opinion, no idea that this must be, that cannot be, that this should be, and that should not be. All must be given. The heart must be purified of all desire. The intellect of all self-will. Every duality must be renounced. The whole world, seen and unseen, must be recognized as one supreme expression of concealed wisdom, power, and bliss. Satchidananda. And the entire being given up, as an engine is passive in the hands of the driver, for the divine love, might, and perfect intelligence to do its work and fulfill its divine Leela. Now he goes on after another long paragraph. This is such beautiful writing. The first process of the yoga is to make the sankalpa of Atma Samarpana. Put yourself with all your heart and all your strength into God's hands. Make no conditions. Ask for nothing, not even for siddhi in the yoga, for nothing at all, except that in you and through you His will may be directly performed. To those who demand from Him, God gives what they demand. But to those who give themselves and demand nothing, He gives everything that they might otherwise have asked or needed. And in addition, He gives Himself and the spontaneous boon of His love. The next process is to stand aside. This is the Purusha consciousness. And watch the working of the divine power in yourself. This working is often attended with disturbance and trouble in the system. Therefore, faith is necessary. Though perfect faith is not always possible at once, for whatever impurity is in you, harbored openly or secretly lurking, is likely to rise at first and be repeated so long as it is not exhaustively swept out. And doubt in this age is an almost universal impurity. But even when doubt assails, stand by and wait for it to pass, availing yourself, if possible, of the satsanga of those who are already advanced on the path. But when that is absent, still holding fast to the principle of the yoga, self-surrender. When distressed within or assailed from without, remember the words of the Gita. By giving thyself up in heart and mind to me, thou shalt cross over all difficulties and perils by my grace. And again, abandon all dharmas, all law, rule, means, and codes of every kind, whether formed by previous habit and belief or imposed from outside, and take refuge in me alone. I will deliver thee from all sin and evil. Do not grieve. I will deliver. You have not to be troubled or struggle yourself, as if the responsibility were yours or the result depended on your efforts. A mightier than you is busy with the matter. Neither disease nor calamity, not the rising of sin and impurity in you, should cause any alarm. Hold fast only to him. I will deliver thee from all sin and evil. But the release does not come by a sudden miracle. It comes by a process of purification. And these things are a part of the process. They are like the dust that rises in clouds when a room long unclosed is at last swept out. Though the dust seem to choke you, yet persevere. And I can tell you this from personal experience, that there are things in myself, now in my 80s, that I thought never would be conquered. And I have found that she lifts them in a moment and discards them. And you will all find this as you proceed on the path. In order to stand aside, you must know yourself as the Purusha, who merely watches, consents to God's work, holds up the Adhar, and enjoys the fruits that God gives. The work itself is done by God as Shakti, by Kali, and is offered up by her as a yajna to Sri Krishna. You are the yajamana, who sees the sacrifice done, whose presence is necessary to every movement of the sacrifice, and who tastes its results. It is this Vijnana and this Ananda that Christ spoke of as the kingdom of God that is within you. We at present are awake in the lower movements, but fast asleep in others. We have to awaken these levels of consciousness within us, and their awakening and unmixed activity is the siddhi of the yoga. For when that happens, we gain the condition of being which is called in the Gita, dwelling in God, of which Sri Krishna speaks when he says, "Verily, thou shalt dwell in me." Once it is gained, we are free and blessed, and have everything towards which we strive. The third process of the yoga. Now we've been through the first one. We have to give up all desires, all attachments, all dualities. And the second one, we have to be the Purusha who watches us, who watches this being. The third process of the yoga is to perceive all things as God. First, as a rule, in the process of knowledge, one comes to see pervading all space and time, one divine, impersonal existence, Sad Atma, without movement, distinction, or feature, in which all names and forms seem to stand with a very doubtful or a very minor reality. In this realization, the one may seem to be the only reality, and everything else Maya, a purposeless and inexplicable illusion. But afterwards, if you do not stop short and limit yourself by the impersonal realization, you will come to see the same Atman not only containing and supporting all created things, but informing. Informing, here's a different definition. It means to form within. Informing all and filling them, and eventually you will be able to understand that even the names and forms are Brahman. You will then be able to live more and more in the knowledge which the Upanishads and the Gita hold up as the rule of life. You will see the self in all existing things, and all existing things in the self. You will be aware of all things as Brahman. But the crowning realization of this yoga is when you become aware of the whole world as the expression, play, or lila of an infinite divine personality. When you see in all not the impersonal Sad Atman, which is the basis of manifest existence, although you do not lose that knowledge, but Sri Krishna, who at once is, bases, and transcends all manifest and unmanifest existence. There is so much in this little book for 28 rupees. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to share the little I know. Otherwise, I would like to read from Savitri. So whatever you would like.
Is it available in the ashram, this book?
Yes. Yes. Sabda? Yes. Well, is there any part you would like me to read? Okay. Then I'll read book 11, from book 11. Because book 11, in book 11, Sri Aurobindo gives us the entire picture of what will be in many of our lives. There's only one canto of about 1,000 lines, and he calls the canto The Eternal Day, the Soul's Choice, and the Supreme Consummation. I want to read you where he speaks of the supramental coming down and entering into us. Now we know that by this time Savitri has defeated death. And the story of Savitri is the story of divine love, which conquers death and builds from this earthly life a divine life. Savitri is requested by the Divine Presence to leave this earth, which is just a realm of sorrow and pain, death and destruction. And the Lord offers her eternal peace and calm. And he says to her, "Choose, Spirit, thy supreme choice not given again. For now from my highest being looks at thee, the nameless, formless peace, where all things rest." And what does she answer to him after many, many lines? And silently the woman's heart replied, "Thy peace, O Lord, a boon within to keep, amid the roar and ruin of wild time, for the magnificent soul of man on earth. Thy calm, O Lord, that bears thy hands of joy. Limitless like ocean round a lonely isle, a second time the eternal cry arose. Wide open are the ineffable gates in front. My spirit leans down to break the knot of earth." And then she answers again, "Thy oneness, Lord, in many approaching hearts, my sweet infinity of thy numberless souls, mightily retreating like a sea in ebb, a third time swelled the great admonishing call. I spread abroad the refuge of my wings. Out of its incommunicable deeps my power looks forth of mightiest splendor, stilled into its majesty of deep sleep, withdrawn above the dreadful whirlings of the world." And what does she say? And passionately the woman's heart replied, "Thy energy, Lord, to seize on woman and man, to take all things and creatures in their grief, and gather them into a mother's arms." Again the voice speaks to her, and she says, "Then all the woman yearningly replied, Thy embrace, which rends the living knot of pain, thy joy, O Lord, in which all creatures breathe, thy magic flowing waters of deep love, thy sweetness give to me for earth and men." And then there's a long passage, beautiful passage, where the Lord speaks to her and says that your will is my will. And he says, "O sunward, thou shalt raise the earth soul to light, and bring down God into the lives of men. Earth shall be my work chamber, and my house, my garden of life, to plant a seed divine. When all thy work in human time is done, the mind of earth shall be a home of light, the life of earth, a tree growing towards heaven, the body of earth, a tabernacle of God. Awakened from the mortal's ignorance, men shall be lit with the Eternal's ray, and the glory of my sun lift in their thoughts, and feel in their hearts the sweetness of my love, and in their acts my power's miraculous drive. My will shall be the meaning of their days. Living for me, by me, in me they shall live. In the heart of my creation's mystery, I will enact the drama of thy soul. And then, lastly, I'll read a few lines from a little further on. A few shall glimpse the miraculous origin, and some shall feel in you the secret force, and they shall turn to meet a nameless tread, adventurers into a mightier day. Ascending out of the limiting breadths of mind, they shall discover the world's huge design, and step into the truth, the right, the vast. Some shall be made the glory's receptacles, and vehicles of the Eternal's luminous power. These are the high forerunners, the heads of time, the great deliverers of earthbound mind, the high transfigurers of human clay, the firstborn of a new supernal race. All shall be drawn into a single plan. A divine harmony shall be earth's law. Beauty and joy remold her way to live. Even the body shall remember God.
Naraji, can I ask a question?
Pardon?
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
How Mother wants the garden of Matrimanya to be as a earthly ground, or she wants gravel or stones or a variety of marbles. She wanted that to cover the garden, or just let it be simple.
Mother wants the divine to inhabit all the significances she gave of the gardens. In the garden of perfection, the number 12 garden, she wants us to know perfection. In the garden of progress, she wants us to know and truly feel progress. In the garden of, what shall we say, harmony, we can answer that question. We're not there. We're not there. We have to find a collective harmony built on our true love of each other, the recognition of our true oneness as one great soul, and the unity that we already have and too often don't realize or express. Namaste.